Take it away.
All right, good morning, everybody. It's 8:38 on November 7th, 2024, and we'll be kicking off the start of the Lower Downtown Design Review Commission meeting. We are expecting one more commissioner who may join us a little bit late, assuming that the weather is holding him up. So as we get started, let's go ahead and get started with some introductions of the commission, and we'll dive in.
Nick Allen, developer.
Fred Glick, property owner, yeah.
I'm Heather Vasquez Johnson, chair and practicing architect.
Craig Lawrence, owner operator.
Jim Gravener, resident.
Great,
And
thank you.
sorry.
Sorry,
And I'm Brittany Bryant, Denver Landmark Preservation staff.
I was just ready to go.
I see. Sorry.
Before we get started with the items on our agenda today, up on the screen, we'll see people, some audio tips for anybody who is joining us virtually today. So for better sound quality, we recommend that you download Zoom on your device. Click the audio settings tab to bring up an additional menu. Try adding a background noise suppression. Test your speaker and microphone to adjust their output, particularly if you have headphones on. And if you are a presenter or public commenter when it's your turn to speak, to mute or unmute, please click the microphone icon at the bottom of your screen. And then if you're continuing to have audio challenges, we recommend you switch to phone for audio. So the first item that we've got today, we do have a meeting record for approval from October 3rd, 2024. Do any commissioners have changes, edits, or updates to that meeting record? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of no's, so meeting record is accepted as presented. All right, we will jump into consent agenda. We have one item on the consent agenda today. That's item number 2024-COA-815 at 1321 15th Street for tree planters. Do any commission members wish to pull this item off of consent and into design review?
Oh, I fun with it this morning.
Okay, I'm not seeing anyone wishing to pull that off, so if somebody would care to make a motion.
Make a motion. Right, bridge, just a moment.
You can just say I moved to.
Oh, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Craig. Do we have a second?
I second.
Great, thank you, Nick. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Great, that passes unanimously.
Can I just, a quick comment on that one?
Certainly.
Just to share with the commission, because Brittany knows my feelings about this one, is that I'd really love to push for finding a path to do an accepted form that could be used throughout Lower Downtown so that individual applicants don't have to spend quite so much to try and protect those tree things. They without some kind of fence or barrier, it is pretty much impossible to grow anything other than trees. All of the shrubbery, et cetera, gets killed by dogs. And, you know, we looked at trying to do this and suddenly it was like, you know, it was gonna be $40,000 or something ridiculous to do this because custom and has to be designed and all of that. Whereas in New York City, you can protect a tree thing for, I think it's between $800 and $1,100 because they have several forms and you just kind of sign up and do it. So just throwing that out there for everybody's, for the good of the order.
I appreciate that, Fred. I know Brittany and I have had conversations about future updates to the guidelines anyway. So I think that we can add that to that list. So thank you, Fred. I appreciate that. If you have joined us virtually and you were the consent agenda item, congratulations, you've passed. If you have any questions, you can reach out to staff. So we will move in today into design review. Our first item that we have is CSA-2024-003-amend at 1515 Winecube Street for a comprehensive sign plan amendment. And I will
read the process first.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Brittany. I'm just ready to go today. So the process for design review, I will announce the design review item, which I just did. If there are any commission members who have a conflict of interest, they will announce and leave the room. Staff will introduce the application and give their recommendation. At that time, commissioners will have the opportunity to ask questions of staff. After the staff presentation and commissioner questions, the applicant is invited to make a presentation. 10 minutes, or it's a 15-minute allowance for a large infill project. And then after the applicant presentation, the commissioners have the opportunity to question the applicant. At that time, we will open it up for public comment. Our public commenters will have 2 minutes to speak. If you would like to speak, please see the screen for the directions, which would be to click the hand raise button if you're on Zoom, or dial *9, or you can email landmark@denvergov.org. We'll follow up with staff clarifications, open commission deliberation, and then have a commission motion and vote. So with that, again, CSA-2024-3003, sorry, apologies, CSA-2024-003-amend 1551 Coop Street. Crystal,
Thanks, Heather.
you bet.
So here you can see a non-contributing building in the district that was built in 2008. This property has currently a CSP in place. However, it was adopted in 2010. So on the records, it says 2009, 2010. And the applicants are coming in to amend and update the CSP to allow different signage types and locations. Next slide. So here you can see the new updated allowance table. They are allowing wall signs, upper story wall signs, projecting signs, canopy signs, window signs, and awning signs. The signs are limited to 3 signs per use or 2 signs for each front line and zone lot, meaning that comp corner tenants would be allowed to have 4 signs total, 2 per front. And also it says here the maximum of 1 upper story wall sign. 12 square feet projecting signage. Standard allowances that we allow per the design guide. Next slide. So here you can see the overall site plan for the property. It has frontage on Wine Coop, 15th Street, and Wewata. So here you can see all the new wall sign locations, projecting signs, canopy, window, and awning. Applicants are coming in to update this because the tenant spaces can sometimes change, so they need to allow new sign locations and types. Next slide. Here you can see the upper story wall sign page only. As you can see, they are asking for allowance locations at Wynkoop Street 15th and Wewata 15th. They are asking for horizontal and vertical types of signage. There is a vertical allowed upper story sign across the street, and so that's where they're kind of taking from. Next slide. So on the top right, you can see the old elevation. This was the only one that was in the previous CSP, and this one was for Wynkoop Street. You can see that they only had like 3 awning signs allowance on this side. So here you can see on the left, the new proposal. They have added window signs, awning, canopy locations, as well as projecting signs and a wall sign location and upper story wall signs. At the far left at the top, you can see the 1 horizontal proposed upper story wall sign location, as well as the vertical location that they are proposing. They do have a note that any new signage vertically oriented would not interrupt any of the architectural features on the building. And they also have a note about how awning or canopy could be used, but not both at the same time, where locations seem to overlap. So for instance, if they wanted to add a canopy kind of to the right, closer to the parking garage, you can see it has orange, which is awning under it. Those could both be used at the same time. They just want to provide more options for tenants. Next slide. And then here's the 15th Street elevation. On the left side of the building, they're arched kind of entryways. So they don't have the awnings there. It's wall or projecting sign with window signage. And then towards the right side of the building, you can see there's awning allowances as well as window and projecting. And then you can see to the left, the other upper story wall sign vertically oriented. It could be a location. And the finally, here's the lee water side. You can see there's one canopy that exists already over an entrance to the structure, as well as another vertically oriented upper story wall sign location, projecting wall signs. Next slide. So here is just the wall sign page. You can see that they are proposing high quality materials, metals, with allowances for exposed LED neon style, halo style, or no lighting. Next slide. Here is the proposed upper story wall sign page, so only one would be allowed for the building total. These are all just proposed locations. As you can see, they have one that's horizontally oriented, the JP Morgan, as well as you can see Steel Bridge here. That's the one that's across the street, which they took inspiration from for wanting this for their structure, as well as a painted wall sign. So there are some vertical signs in the district, therefore staff wasn't against them as long as they fit with the architecture on the building, and they will be non-illuminated. Next slide. Here are the projecting signs. They are required to be shaped iconographic and three-dimensional, as you can see here. And they do allow halo lighting, down lighting from gooseneck lamps and other types. Next slide. Here's some of the proposed canopy signs. So at the top right, you can see the Fogo de Chao sign. That sign is existing on the building, but they wanted to have other options. You can see they have cutout letters, just non-illuminated letters, metal letters. They would also allow halo illumination here and channel letters as well, which is what is currently on Fogo de Chao. Next slide. And then here are the window sign proposals. They would be secondary types of signage allowed in the lower part of the window base. And then here are the proposed awning signs. Awning signs would only be allowed on the balance of the awning, not on the top part of the awning, and they would be non-illuminated static. Next slide. And then here's the proposed parking projecting sign. They currently have one location. They've added two to this application, one on either side of the parking garage, but only one can be used at a time. And then finally, here are the acceptable building materials, which are metals and high quality materials that can be allowed. They also have the lighting on the right side, which could be halo, open channel letters with faux neon, gooseneck lighting, or edge lighting. And so with that, we are recommending approval of the application. Just going through the application, I did notice that they did not have the maximum projection for wall signs noted, which is 3.5 inches to match design guideline 3.1J. And also I just noticed that awning was spelled a little bit incorrectly throughout the document, so having that corrected as well before final adoption.
Thank you, Crystal. Are there any questions from the commission for staff?
I had one, on the 3.5 inch depth, do the standoffs count towards that depth
They do.
off the face?
Any other staff questions, clarifications? Okay, is the applicant here
I think they're on search.
on virtual? Great.
I guess I have one other question
That's
on,
Taylor's moving them over.
subsequent individual signs. So each sign would be reviewed by this commission in the context of this plan after
Not all
approval,
signs.
not
Projecting
necessarily.
Signs do come back to the commission, and upper story wall signs at this time. All other signs could be reviewed administratively as long as they meet the requirements of the CSB. and that design guideline.
Understood, okay.
We all set, Taylor? Okay. Okay, great. If the applicant is ready to give a presentation, you have 10 minutes, and if you could start with your name and address for the record, that would be great.
Cynthia Diaz, 1515 Wine Coop Street.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so with the application, the updated CSP, we did achieve updating the building's 2009 version, and we achieved illustrating complementary signage types that will give future tenants and existing tenants the opportunity to draw attention to their space while meeting all of Landmark's requirements. Additional sign placements for future tenants that may reconfigure their exterior storefront was also captured in the revised CSP, and then they obviously are dictated by the maximum signage table. So I think we were inclusive of all of the, clarifying all of the expectations for future tenants or any storefront configurations that are altered. That is all on my end. I think as far as the application, it was pretty much structured to follow all of Landmark's requirements, placements, sign types. I don't know if there's anything else you need from me. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Cynthia. Are there any commission questions for the applicant? Fred?
Yeah, I did want to follow up on the 3.5 inch depth of wall signs question with the applicant. Was it your intention to leave that out? Is the 3.5 inch depth satisfactory to you guys from your perspective, or what do you think?
I think based on with our designer, I think that was satisfactory, but I'm unaware if there's additional wiggle room there.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Do we have anyone from the public wishing to speak on this project? Not seeing anyone in person. If you are on Zoom, if you could raise your hand. Okay, it doesn't look like we've got anyone for public comment. So do we have any staff recap or clarification?
I will just recap saying that we do stick to that 3.5 inch depth. However, there are some instances where it wouldn't work with the building, or the applicant comes to us like there's a depth we need a little more. Sometimes we do allow up to 4 or something different if there's a need or a necessary reason. If it was much more than that, like 10 or something, that would be different. We would have to have that come back because that doesn't meet the guidelines or the intents. Sometimes there is a little wiggle room.
Yeah, it's good. I was just looking at some of the examples, which are really elegant signs, look like more than 3.5 inches to me. So I feel like if there's a window for them to get some wiggle room, if it's a really nice sign, that want to allow that.
Is that wiggle room part of staff's review after the cover?
Typically is with
Okay.
staff. I would say we bring things to our staff meeting if we think it's a design that is meeting all the things. It's just slightly more because they have to penetrate through the wall more, or they need the spacers to get the lighting right. We usually will work with them, but like I said, if it's something that's drastically more, like double the amount, we don't.
Would adding the condition, maybe we're into the discussion here.
I think maybe we're opening deliberations.
So,
Yeah.
just from a process standpoint, I'm just asking the question if does adding the condition help with that wiggle room, or imperil that wiggle room, I guess, is that.
And it's a standard in the guidelines,
Yeah.
so we were in CSPs.
Yeah.
Again, we don't strictly adhere to it, but it is good to have because we get wall signs per zoning are allowed to project 24 inches. And that often does not look well or elegant with historic buildings, so.
Okay, so we've opened deliberations. What does everybody think?
Sorry,
Okay.
violating the order.
I honestly, with the applicant saying that they're fine with the 3.5, I'm happy to put it forward as staff recommends.
Agree, and I agree with the staff recommendations on all these parts.
But for the intent of trying to enliven downtown to get more tenants and more activity and things like that, allowing those tenants more flexibility and options and how they promote their businesses is always a good thing. So, and this meets the guidelines, meets the intent, so I agree. With that, does somebody care to make a motion this morning?
I'll make a motion because I'm ready this time.
Great.
I move to approve with conditions, application number CSA 2024-003-amend for the CSP amendment at 1515 Wincoop Street as per design policy, standards, and guidelines related to signage. Presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report with the following conditions. Correct the maximum projection for all wall signs to 3.5 inches to match design guideline 3.1J. And 2, correct the spelling of awning throughout the document.
Thank you, Craig. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great, thank you, Fred. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, congratulations, Cynthia. You've passed with those conditions as noted, and you can just follow up with Crystal. Okay, and then we will move on now to our second design review item, which is item 2024-COA-715 at 1616 Market Street, the Thompson Hotel. I will turn it over to Andrew.
Morning. So our first slide that we can see here is a proposed rendering of the project I'm going to be discussing. Brittany, if you want to go ahead and move to the next slide. So the building at 1616 Market Street, completed in 2019, is prominent contemporary construction at the intersection of Market Street and 16th Street Mall. Currently operated by the Thompson Hotels, it houses a commercial hotel space and separate dining space on the ground floor. Next slide. Currently, the restaurant at the ground floor, Chez Maggie, is occupying the storefront along the mall, is proposing to expand its seating throughout the addition of 2 raised prefabricated platform sections. Next slide. The first platform section will be situated at the building's southwestern corner, extending 16 foot 6 inches from the 16th Street Mall elevation and spanning 27 foot 5 inches in width, aligning with the Market Street facade. The second section, approximately 14 feet southeast of the first, leaves room for an entry walkway and a new host stand. This platform will extend 16 foot 3 inches from the building and span 58 feet in width. Next slide. The grade of this portion of the 16th Street Mall slopes downward towards Union Station. Consequently, these prefabricated platforms are designed to provide a level seating area, with the western section rising from grade level to 1 foot 1 at its highest point, and the eastern section extending up to 2 foot 1 in height. Both sections feature ramps at grade level to ensure smooth transitions and accessibility. To meet safety standards, each platform will have 30-inch tall 3x3 tube steel frame guardrails with a wire mesh infill. And this is to be painted in either the standard federal green or, based on previous LDDRC approvals, a black color. Next slide. In respect for the existing landscape, the platforms include removable panels and grades to accommodate 2 existing street trees. As semi-permanent structures, the platforms will not be anchored to the building or the mall, allowing for easy removal if necessary. This installation aims to activate the section of the mall, creating a new connection to public space while preserving a clear 10-foot wide pedestrian pathway. While this raised seating is unconventional for the 16th Street Mall, the proposal aligns with the sloping grade and maintains the area's character. Next slide. Additionally, the proposal includes installing 7 low-profile infrared electric heaters within the existing canopy to optimize year-round use of the outdoor space. These heating units will be 56 inches wide and 8.5 inches in depth. Mounting heights will be consistent, however, because of the sloping grade, the easternmost heaters will be closer to the seating areas than the westernmost heaters. Next slide. So in summary, staff recommend approval as this proposal brings new vibrancy to the public space along the 16th Street Mall, adheres to the guidelines for Lower Downtown Historic District, Lower Downtown Streetscapes, and remains a reversible, non-permanent feature.
Thank you, Andrew. Do you have any questions for staff? Not, I'll start. I assume that this has kind of also been checking the boxes with Doty and other city
Oh,
agencies.
they already have all those approvals.
I would assume
No,
so. I
that's
just
a
wanted to
Good
clarify, like,
question. Yeah,
it's, you know, there's a lot of activity with the
Yeah, a lot
mall,
of
with the
parties required.
trees and forestry and things like that. So I want to make sure that, you know, hopefully this is the last
We are
box
the
to check
last.
Yeah.
for that applicant. Okay. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff this morning? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you. Applicant is here. Would you care to make a presentation? You'll have 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Can you come up and join
over
us
here?
here? Yes, please.
all right.
And then I'll have you start with name and address, and then Brittany will start the 10-minute clock.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
If you could start with your name and address for the record,
Sure,
and then you'll have 10 minutes. You don't need to use it all, but you have 10
okay.
minutes.
Hi, Julian Tucker, Jim, over at the Thompson Hotel.
Hi, Amanda Miller with the Downtown Never Business Improvement District.
And we also have Shannon, our Director of Engineering, Scott Bishop, who was the designer of the patio. I guess the only thing I would add, and if there's any technical questions, these gentlemen can certainly help us, is that Thompson Hotels was built 2019. And Scott was one of the main designers on that project. I don't know if any of you have ever been to the hotel. Sits right on the corner of 650 Market. The design features really wanted to really incorporate it into what lower downtown was, the direction it was going in from the mall perspective. So the patio design was really mindful of that, thoughtful of making sure that it fit within the scope of what was happening with the redirection of the 6th Street Mall project. We worked very closely with DDP and the 6th Street Mall project to make sure that the concept kept in step with what was happening on the mall. So we were really mindful, really thoughtful about that space and ensuring that it really incorporated what we were trying to do with lower downtown and 6th Street Mall. So it's really, we think it's gonna be a really great addition to that area, provide some walkability. Obviously patio dining is very, very, very popular here in Colorado. And we think it's gonna be a great addition to the mall and really kind of accentuate everything that we were trying to do down there. I think to make it more of a space where people could come and dine and walk and bring their families. So from a design feature, I just wanted to make sure that, you know, we were very clear that that was really what we were thinking about. So everything that you see here had that in mind. I had a chance to go and actually see the actual patio as it was being constructed, and it's absolutely gorgeous and stunning. So we really appreciate the opportunity for the board here to give us the opportunity to make continue to beautify the Civic Mall. So thank you very much. If you want to add anything there?
Yeah, a couple comments from the Business Improvement District side. Just so everyone's aware, the bid has a cluster permit. We're the holders of the cluster permit that allows the bid to manage vending, kiosks, and sidewalk cafes along 16th. And in accordance with that cluster permit, all sidewalk cafes, including the Thompson's proposed patio and deck, are reviewed and approved by our 16th Street Mall Use Committee, which has representatives from Dottie's right-of-way department, RTP, the health department, Denver Police, and Denver Fire. And, you know, in the presentation, they really covered the reasons for the structure to be sloped and not just a typical sidewalk cafe, to provide that level surface for dining. The design is modular and meant to be installed easily and broken down easily, and it abides by all the guidelines that the Downtown Denver Business Improvement District has set in place for the Thompson Hotel, including that it's a non-permanent structure. It's not affixed to the granite pavers, and it provides access for the trees when we need to provide treatments and things like that. And the Thompson Hotel is also aware that the bid does snow removal at this area. So that's not an issue. And so the Downtown Denver Business Improvement District and the Downtown Denver Partnership approve of this project and think there'll be a benefit to the downtown, lower downtown area and bring vibrancy to a block of 16 that has no other patios at this moment. The Thompson Hotel would be that only one. We have a few vacancies on the opposite side of the street. That could be restaurant usage eventually, but right now the patio that the Thompson would be providing is providing a lot of vibrancy to that block.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Yeah. Do we have any questions for the applicant this morning?
Thank you
I'm
very
not
much.
seeing any. Thank you. Do we have anyone in the room or on the Zoom for public comments? No. Okay, we have no virtual attendees. So with that, do we have any staff recap or clarification?
I just have one comment to make. Brittany, could you pull up the last slide again, that rendering? Thank you. So I just wanted to mention, so the heaters that we're talking about are proposed to go into these black metal structured canopies. So those are already existing. Just wanted to make sure that that was clear. And then the LDDRC does not have purview over the removable umbrellas. And I think that was it, right, Brittany? In terms of
And the
purview.
furniture.
And-
Oh, and the removable
Yeah.
furniture.
Crushed it.
Just wanted to make sure that was out there.
Great, thank you. Great, so we'll open deliberations, and what does everybody think?
Just, unless you want to make an argument that it would be a fun party game, having people dine at an angle and that would bring activation. I just can't see any reason to say no. It just seems like a logical.
How do we get more of them?
Yeah.
I know, I walk past the Thompson quite frequently, and it's got a slope. It would not be a subtle angle that you'd be dining at if it was flat on the sidewalk. So I will comment. I know Andrew pointed out that the railings on the patio area would either be the approved federal green or black. And I would throw in my preference for black. I think that it would match the structure better and be complementary to the building. So if that is I don't think it needs to be a condition. I think it'd be fine green, but I think it would be better black. So I'll put that on the record and on the testimony, but I've spec'd the heaters that they've called out before. They're very low profile, they're very elegant. I've got like no issues with them. I think they're great, so. Anybody, if there are no other comments, anybody care to make a motion?
Sure. I move to approve application 2024 COA 715 for the raised outdoor seating and electric heaters at 1660 Market Street, as per design policy standards and guidelines 4.30 and 5.10 from the Denver Guidelines for Landmark Structures and Districts, 10.4 and 10.4.1 from the Design Guidelines for Lower Downtown Historic District, and the section on sidewalk cafes from the Design Guidelines for Lower Downtown Streetscape. Presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Do we have a second?
My second.
Thank you, Nick. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstained? Congratulations, you passed unanimously with our
You're all
required.
invited to the opening party on the patio.
Maybe when the weather's a little better. Okay, and with that, that's our final design review item, so we'll close design review. And we do have a business item today and a discussion item, so. Open up the business items.
So could you read the process? We don't have any public comments, so you can probably skip.
That's okay, I'll skip public comments, so we don't have any public comment. So I will announce our business item this morning, and staff will introduce that business item, at which time the commissioners can ask questions of staff. We don't have anyone for public comment, but if we did, it's the same process as design review. We'll follow up with any staff clarifications, any necessary commission dial deliberation, and then we will take a motion and vote. So our business item this morning is the 2025 filing deadlines and meeting calendar for the LDDRC.
Okay, so we have a big change for the 2025 calendar. And that proposal is to eliminate the second Thursday of the month meeting. We initially started that due to the number of infill projects that we were seeing within the lower downtown historic district. Most of those sites are now occupied, and we have not had need of the second meeting of the month for over a year at this point. However, that would still, per our ordinance, we're still allowed to hold special meetings. So if we ever needed that, we could still do that. But we are proposing to eliminate that second Thursday of the month meeting. So with that in mind, we're just looking at meeting on the first Thursday of the month, which is what is required by our ordinance. And looking at those dates, we did have some concern over some of those meeting dates. And that's principally the January meeting due to the New Year holiday. So if we were to meet on the first Thursday of the month, that would be January 2nd, which is just after the New Year holiday. The city is open on that day, so we could conceivably meet on that day, but we did want to note that for the commission discussion. If the commission would not like to meet on that date, we are recommending we meet on the January 9th, which is the second Thursday of the month. Also July, we have some concerns over the July 4th holiday, again, conflicting with the calendar. So we would, we were to meet on the first Thursday of the month, that would be July 3rd. Again, the city is open that day, but the very next day is the July 4th holiday. And that also aligns with a very long weekend. So keep that in mind as discussing that. Again, if the commission would like to adjust that date, we're proposing the second Thursday of the month, which would be July 10th. And then finally, looking at non-Christian holidays, in October, there might be a conflict with the Yom Kippur holiday at the first meeting in October. So again, we're proposing to adjust that to the second meeting in October. So those are our meeting dates that we're proposing. And we as staff are recommending the adjustment for the second Thursday. However, you as the commission can ultimately make that decision. And generally, you have to agree on making this adjustment, as any commissioner can object to adjustments. I would also like to note that we are proposing another change to how we internally as staff operate this board and commission. So currently the filing deadline is 3 weeks and 2 days before the intended meeting date, which is on a Tuesday. We're proposing to change that to a full 4 weeks and align with Thursday. So the filing deadline for LPC is a full 4 weeks. So we're proposing to make the same change here. It's a very tight time frame for us to turn around applications with 3 weeks, 2 days, because we do a week of noticing of those applications. And also we just wanted to move it from a Tuesday to a Thursday. This will allow us to better manage our calendars. So the filing deadlines that you see reflected on the screen also reflect that 4-week adjustment that we're proposing. So those are the changes that we're proposing for the 2025 calendar. And happy to leave that, go back to that slide, but we are, our suggested motion is to adopt the 2025 filing deadlines, which again would be 4 weeks, with adjustment to the January, July, and October meetings to occur on the second Thursday of the month.
Thanks, Brittany. Questions for staff?
And kind of comment, I mean, with regards to shifting the dates, I think for the most part that makes sense. I admit I will be gone on the 9th of January, so it means I'll miss the January meeting, but that doesn't really matter. And I think shifting the October one because of Yom Kippur, you know, it seems to open the city up to some real questions if we have an applicant who can't appear because of that delay. With regards to the filing deadlines, my only concern about this is that it does then make it impossible for somebody who is asked to come back on an application to come back the next month. And that's always been a tight turnaround, but I think with some applications, it's been possible for people to make the adjustments and get back in here. That will no longer be possible if we move to this. So and that concerns me a little bit just because of how far it pushes it out. I guess what I would suggest is, or ask, is there a possibility of shifting it so that, adjusting the language so that there's a 4-week deadline for new applications, but that resubmittals have a shorter turnaround. Or items that are also items that are
Continued.
continued.
Well, you can always continue applications to a date certain, and that can be the very next.
And but
And I think Fred's point is if we
Yeah.
continue for more information, the filing deadline's already passed, is that?
But you could continue it, is what I'm saying, and state the date certain, which is the very next meeting.
The example of just a couple weeks ago where we did reject an application and they were able to turn it around. In that case, could we have continued the application? They would have resubmitted new, okay, so we can, instead of rejecting, we could just continue. Got it, understood.
Can I make a suggestion? Amy Amadon with the design review staff. Hope it's okay. I joined you here instead of yelling from behind you. We could have some sort of an asterisk that says a continued application has a 3-week filing deadline or something, because we don't have to start the memo from scratch. It's not as big a deal for us to do a short turnaround, something between 3 and 4 weeks.
As long as there's a mechanism, I agree with the perception, because I think that's really important to be able to have applicants get in a month.
is there any issue, and I guess I'd look over to Nate, with continuing versus a rejection?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, in past, we have, in cases, rejected an application. And the applicant has come back to us the next month with a resubmittal,
Revisions.
with revisions to it. The question is, restructuring it as proposed by staff means that we would not proceed that way. We would continue it instead of rejecting it.
Well, that depends, right? If you think that the application doesn't meet the guidelines, that should be a rejection. If you think that you need more information, that's a continuance. So yes, to your point, if you reject it, they would have to meet the new filing deadline. If you continue it, it would be a matter of saying, hey, we're gonna continue this to the next meeting. And staff will have to
I think
work
that
with you to meet that deadline.
I think that distinction of requiring more information versus thinking that an application does not meet is pretty critical, and I'd hate to see us.
I agree with that, cause I don't want us to mistakenly continue something that should be denied.
Yeah.
The continuation is meant to be on, generally, we think it's okay, but we need a little more information on X, Y, and Z before we feel like we can approve it.
I also just want to share from staff's perspectives. When those applications were turned around within one meeting, it's a Thursday to Tuesday filing deadline. That's basically the applicant comes here before the commission on Thursday, and the filing deadline is that next Tuesday at noon. It is very stressful for us, to be frankly honest.
Yeah.
Well, it's stressful for the applicant as
Yeah.
well, but, the reality is that if we push it, they're not going to be able to resubmit they're not gonna be able to be back before 2 full months, and that's a pretty significant impact economically on our city, and particularly as we prioritize the revitalization of downtown. I think putting that barrier up is frankly kind of contrary to some of our objectives as a city. And I don't think it is a regular occurrence, but it does happen. And I kind of think it's unconscionable for us to not find a path for people where they are willing to put in the work and turn something around that quickly to come back.
Second that completely.
Devil's advocate, though, just playing the opposite side, knowing that there would be essentially, you get denied on a meeting and you have 4 more weeks. Would that encourage applicants to work a little bit more closely with staff to make sure that they have something. I feel like sometimes we get applications that staff are recommending denial on. And it's pretty clear that why staff is recommending denial and that these things can't be made. You know, I would argue the project that we recently denied and they turned around in 4 weeks. They had that staff recommendation of denial. They knew that staff was gonna say that before, and they said, yeah, we wanna do it anyway. I mean, I would suspect they were probably working on it in the background, knowing that it might get denied, that there was
Well,
a chance.
I mean, also like,
Like, does
It's-
knowing that there's a longer, like that they cannot no longer, that they will no longer be able to turn that around over a weekend and get that back from the staff, encourage applicants to work a little bit closer with staff to get to a point that staff can recommend approval or
So,
approval with conditions
just
on
to
some of
share-
those things.
just to share before commission discusses, that happens a lot with LPC. It is impossible to happen with this board with the 3-week filing deadline. We cannot give applicants comments really and have them adjust their application with we just hit 1,600 in terms of our workload numbers this year. It's, as Crystal and I mostly staff this board, what we get in on the filing deadline is what we take to the commission. LPC is the only time we have time to make minor adjustments. So there are slightly more denials before this commission or recommendations for continuances than there are LPC. I'm not saying this would totally solve that problem, but also something to consider as you discuss.
Could I offer a couple of suggestions as well? That asterisk I was mentioning, saying that you could have a 3-week time period to resubmit. You're writing the rules here, so you could say that's either in the case of a denial or a continuance. You also do have that option to call a special meeting. So if you're feeling like this is really not appropriate to have someone pushed out a whole month, we can go back to that second Thursday for a particular instance to hold a meeting and hear their item faster.
I just think providing the 3-week option for a denial or continuous, to my mind, makes a lot more sense. And frankly, it also says, and it is a tight deadline, whether it's 3 weeks or, 3.5 weeks. It is a tight deadline, and it means, I think, that we're only gonna get people who, where we're close on it. If they're far off,
They're gonna need the time.
they're gonna need the time anyway. But I think, for something where I hate to see projects held up for a whole extra month unnecessarily, just because we've restricted the deadline set tightly. And I think it doesn't need to be 3 weeks. I mean, I think the current deadline, as tight as it is, helps to restrict who's gonna come forward for that. No?
I tend to agree with you, though. I think having a mechanism of allowing a resubmit to be able to get in the next month is good optics, but also consistent with the direction of trying to revitalize. So I agree.
Again, devil's advocate, and I was gonna try and not talk this meeting. I agree, sometimes it's like the optics of being able to get the next meeting is good, especially if it's just like, hey, can you give us the dimension of this guardrail, or can you take out the reference to windows? That's something we can do. Do we wanna take it, or does it help us to take the onus on this board to be like, hey, you're not gonna make the next filing deadline to be the first Thursday, but we can do a special meeting on the third. Is it the third?
You could
Second
do
Thursday.
special meetings, you don't have to say their specific date, they just have to have 5 days noticing.
But I'm just
so,
trying to give you the
yeah.
4 weeks you need for your filing. I don't know.
yeah, You could set them for whatever though.
As far as I'm concerned, that's an acceptable way to go about it too. I mean, I think as long as there's a mechanism, so they don't have to wait 2 months.
Can I throw out another option? Just as a thought? What if they're allowed to resubmit? What if the 3 weeks is an exception approved by the board? So if we get an application and we're looking at it and it's like, and in conversation with the applicant here that we think they could turn it around and make the changes that are appropriate for that next meeting that quickly, we could approve
Setting a filing deadline.
setting a
I
filing
think it's
deadline.
Part of the denial.
Whereas if we get an applicant who's here and an application that it's like, they're playing with us and that, you know, they're not, clearly not working with staff and they clearly are just trying to push something through, that we don't have to give that exception. Does that make any sense to folks?
And I think that's what Amy proposed, because you are writing the rules.
I mean, some of it, I feel like it's hypotheticals, like Andy's examples of like, you know, remove the window notations or add this dimension. Those would be an approval with conditions.
Yeah, but I was just trying to.
Yeah, I get, I mean, some of the, we're all,
I think we
we all
saw
have to
the,
think, we all have to think hypothetically.
Yeah, but we
about
saw the
most of
very
it.
real example
Yeah.
of 2 weeks ago, which
It's a month ago,
was
but
a very hairy
Yeah.
situation, as we know, but that was an example where they did turn that around in 4 days.
I like that approach, though, that compromise of setting the baseline at 4 weeks, period. And then with board approval, adjusting to 3 for ones that, you know, like the last one, they'd worked with the various entities so thoroughly and so diligently that, you know, we'll play along too. So I like that approach.
So maybe in summary, filing deadlines are appropriate for new submittals, new applications. I still think that there may be some allowance to add that asterisk of additional information requested as the result of a continuance, or action of continuance in a meeting can be reduced to 3 weeks.
So that would, yes. But that ties in nicely with our next conversation item,
Yeah.
which is the bylaws, which is where that would appear. So if you are comfortable with the 4 weeks and the adjustment, I would encourage you to,
But
And
it's,
then we can put in the bylaws that, you know, a resubmittal due to an action of continuance can be reduced to a 3-week
but also rejection.
filing
Well,
deadline. Well, I think that maybe what we're talking about is that you know, at the time of a denial, the commission
Okay,
may set a 3-week,
so
a deadline of,
and
a deadline of 3 weeks
Still-
prior.
that would still be in the bylaws,
Yeah.
which is our very next discussion item. So I'm encouraging, if we are okay with the 4 weeks and we understand we want to make some rules, we need to do that in the bylaws, which is our very next discussion. Discussion item. This is a business item. I'd recommend we make a motion on this, and then transition into the.
What Brittany
I'm
said
gonna
is-
say it though, I don't accept these dates without the bylaws incorporating that option of.
Yeah.
Like, I think we gotta do it in reverse. Cause I trust everybody that we're gonna get to an answer on the next discussion. But I think it's absolutely critical that the mechanism for,
Do we need to
the
make a
3-week
motion to
turnaround.
address the discussion item first and then come back to our business item?
So that,
Or do we need to take
So
care of
the
our
reason
business
we-
item first and then?
the
address
reason
our-
we have the meeting dates is because we need to set filing deadlines for January. Those are gonna happen before you meet again.
I think Nick's just saying,
Yeah.
can we talk about bylaws now and then come back and make our
Well, we're
motion?
not proposing to adopt bylaws today. It's just a discussion item. So we would bring the bylaws back next meeting for official adoption. So that's kind of the situation we're in, is that we
Have to put the chicken
two-
before the egg.
two conflicting needs, is that we need to set the 2025 calendar so we can advertise our December filing deadlines.
I think if we pause this discussion for a second, hear your input on the bylaws, and you'll have to have a leap of faith with us that we bring back the bylaws exactly as you directed at the next
Yeah.
meeting.
Well, the
But we
bylaws
need
are
you
up
to-
to us, so.
Yeah.
right, yeah, I'm asking for the commission's leap of
Yeah.
faith. I'm not necessarily asking for staff. And I think, sounds like we have an agreement on that.
I think we can get there. I think that, you know, like I said, we make the rules, so I think. It sounds like we're all generally on the same page that, you know, a 4-week submittal is appropriate for a new application. And then as we get into it, when we feel like if it's a continuation that can reduce, or if we can address how we, together in this conversation, we can address how we want to write it in the bylaws, that a resubmittal based on denial, that, you know, however we want to do that, I think we can get there.
Fair enough.
All right, somebody care to make a motion on the filing deadlines and meeting dates for 2025?
I'll go for it. I move to approve the 2025 filing deadline and meeting dates with adjustments to the January, July, and October meetings to occur on the second Thursday of the month.
Thank you, Craig. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Fred. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? All right. Business items have been concluded. We will move into discussion. Typically the same process. I'll announce the discussion item. Staff will introduce that item, an item for discussion. There's typically no public comment. We no longer have anyone in the room or on the Zoom, so we don't need to worry about that. And then the commission can discuss with ourselves and with staff, and then there will be no action or vote taken for discussion item today. So our discussion item is the LDDRC bylaw updates.
Okay. So we have been working on updating the bylaws, and that initially started with a conversation to allow the commissioners to attend virtually. However, that quickly spiraled into some much needed other updates. So we are going to go over those much needed other updates. So the first section of the bylaws is election of officers. We do that every year in May. We are not proposing any changes to this section of the bylaws. However, as we've been discussing, filing deadlines. So there is, currently, it is not written anywhere what the commission's process is on filing deadlines. Currently, in past years, you have adopted the filing deadlines when you have adopted the calendar. We have been advised by the attorneys that this needs to be more clearly spelled out and written down. So we have added this entire section into the bylaws that explains the filing deadlines. And section 1, 2, 3, that is generally language that we have pulled from the meeting calendar, but also down below in meetings of the commission that explain about the second meeting of the month, which we're obviously proposing to eliminate, and how many applications we would have on each agenda. So that has been added to this section regarding the filing deadlines. So again, we're proposing a 4-week filing deadline. All applications are due at noon. And with consultation with the chair, staff and filing deadlines may be adjusted to accommodate city and holiday closures. And per our discussion, we would add some adjustments based on returning applications or denials. So that would need to be added based on our discussion that we were just having on the calendar. We do schedule all applications on a first come, first served basis. We would still have no more than 5 applications on a single agenda, because that is kind of what we have discussed with you as the commission, is a fair amount, a number of applications to review at each meeting. Again, we could always hold special meetings if needed. Those only require 5 days of noticing. And then what is also new is this section 4 that discuss how we as staff set the meeting agendas. So we meet on the Thursday following the filing deadline and discuss what applications are received. We have determined that we as staff can realistically handle 3 applications individually for a commission meeting. So we're wanting to make it very clear to our applicants that if a staff receives an excess of 3 applications, they would be reassigned to a different staff person if possible, or otherwise they would be moved to a next month's meeting agenda. Again, you can always hold special meetings, but to balance our ability to process applications and also to timely act on applications. So that is a update that we're making to the filing deadlines in terms of adding that language to the bylaws. And obviously, we would need to add that section and per our discussion regarding special circumstances. So that is that section there.
Can I add a little bit to that? So we are in this document before you, trying to make some alignment between your bylaws and LPC's bylaws, although there are differences clearly, I think, between the sort of cases that come before you and some of your priorities as a commission. So again, here for discussion about all of this, and I've clearly heard from you a moment ago that timely turnaround of applications is highly important to you and important to us as well. But as Brittany mentioned, we're at 1,600 applications so far this year with a relatively small staff and have an unfilled position. We have people on leave. You know, things happen, and it's a high priority for me as manager of the design review team to make sure that we have a staff that can enjoy their jobs and, you know, not be so buried in work that we're turning things around too quickly and not doing our best to provide support for you. The notion here sometimes happens that LPC and LDDRC land on the same week. So we have 2 packets to get out, and a couple of sessions ago, we had one staff person with 7 cases on their plate for 1 week, and that's really hard on us. So we have proposed the idea that in addition to there being a maximum number of items on your agenda, that any one staff person has a maximum as well. I promise you that internally, we will try very hard not to pull the trigger on this and tell someone they have to wait a month. We will reassign if we can, unless someone is so immersed in a case that that doesn't make sense. We will ghostwrite for each other if we can. We will do what we can, but we are asking for a threshold of a point where we say we just don't have capacity for this. So that's the idea behind this change.
I was gonna ask the question on that for that section before. I mean, that feels like it would be impactful to applicants, mostly if they have been having, you know, say they've been having ongoing conversations with Brittany and Brittany's been their staff person to date. I mean, this wouldn't necessarily have any effect on, I have a brand new application. I haven't talked to anybody at staff yet. I'm sending it in, like,
Right.
that, that wouldn't.
It could
that-
impact them because, you know, we never know when someone's coming back. We pre-app something and don't hear from someone for months and, you know,
Yeah.
perfect storm, everybody lands at the same filing deadline. That's when it becomes a problem for us. And it is possible that a brand new applicant, you know, would be told they have a month's delay if we hit these capacity issues. And again, I commit to you that we're gonna try very hard not to have this happen, but we need a little parachute, is the idea here.
And for clarity, it was me who had these items. It was 7 for LPC and 5 for this commission. I had to unload those applications. Andrew took the Thompson Hotel. Like, we already kind of do this. We're just providing more formal language of how we manage our workload.
You need, and I don't know if we're open for discussion, but I just want to ask a question on this section 4 though. Do we need to add language that talks about how certain, those 3 gain priority? Is it a first come, first serve? Is it, you know, how does, that way someone doesn't say, well, I got bumped, why did they get bumped?
We do have in section 3, it is all first come, first serve right now. So that is that current language, but if you feel like there's some other mechanism.
I would defer to Nate, just, you never want to have someone come back and say, well, you should have bumped so-and-so versus me because of staff capacity. So, just a thought, I don't know that I have a
We don't,
solution.
yeah, I think also just to throw some other wrench in the system, when things are in special design review districts, which require a supermajority, we have moved them around based on who
Commissioner
is-
availability.
Yeah, but that's, you know, as we're proposing to eliminate the second meeting. But that's why I told you really early for this meeting, because we knew we'd have special, and I already knew Amy was out, and so that meant everyone needed to come.
there, I mean, obviously different applications have a much different level of scrutiny, right? You know, simple sign permits versus a full design review of a building. So, I mean, is that just applying kind of a number to it, to me seems odd. Isn't it more of an internal staffing availability than it is a bylaw?
You could give them, I don't know, is there a way to give, do you have to balance clarity with flexibility?
Yeah,
Right,
I think that's what we were trying to do. We already limit it to 5 applications on the agenda, like that's what we determined the cap for this commission, 5. This month is the closest we've ever come to that, and we had applications that just weren't ready, so they're coming in December. But so there's no change proposed to that language, which is here in this section 3. We've always been able to add additional items based on consultation with the chair. We just really haven't had to do that because we haven't even reached our cap for this meeting, but the clarity that we were trying to provide is in terms of how we internally operate, which is the section 4. The attorneys have indicated to us that it is more of an internal process and maybe it doesn't belong in the bylaws. But again, we were trying to provide that clarity so that we're,
I'm supportive of putting some mechanism in the bylaws that speak to, there is a reasonable cap on both what can appear in any one meeting and what staff can actually do. That way we can guarantee quality as well as timeliness. But so whatever the appropriate language is that gives the proper clarity and yet protection, I suppose, to the city.
I guess I would suggest that maybe in the bylaws, we delegate the answer, we delegate the management of that to staff. And just indicate that staff will determine based on it. And I guess I'd make the recommendation that staff maybe publish on the webpage guidelines about what capacity is and in what cases items may be pushed for a month simply due to staff capacity. Does that make sense? But I'd rather see us just delegate that question to staff to manage, because as it pointed out, it's, saying it's this many, if we have 3 updates to a CSP, that might be different from an infill, from 3 infills. They're adjusting it because the comp sign plan called for 2 upper story things and they really only want 1. That's not gonna take as much time as an infill. So I just think delegating it to staff to manage seems far more reasonable and far more effective.
I think we can work on this language. The reason we wanted to have something stated in writing is that this can become a very tense discussion. And we are your representatives in trying to carry out an efficient process. And we wanted to just have a policy that we could rely on if the moment came and we had to say to someone, you're on the next agenda.
I think we support, I'm speaking for myself, but maybe for the rest of the commission, I think we support that. Just find the right language that works for you guys and for the.
Essentially, the policy is that the commission trusts staff to manage the process.
Well, and is there a mechanism too? I know there's the much greater discussion of the standards themselves. Are there ways that the LDDRC standards can be updated or modernized in some way to make everybody's job easier? So I'm asking the question, but I think it invites the discussion of what are the big hangups from a review standpoint that could be made easier, right? Like, I'm sure you have a lot of ideas. Yeah, it's a whole other project, but I think it's important that we.
I would love to update the guidelines, but it's been an impossible task. Crystal and I were on a team to do that. That started in 2017.
Very seriously, believe how they get that going.
But I do know Fred has to leave, so I'd like to move on to a next important section. So again, we're just, this cross out in the first section of meetings of the commissions is just been moved up to filing deadlines. We have added that meetings can be adjusted to accommodate holidays and city closures there. To the bylaws, section 4 and 5 that you're seeing on here is not something that was in the LDDRC bylaws, but we're in the LPC bylaws. And it just essentially says that the chairperson will have an agenda prepared, which we do already, and that we
Same.
will have meeting minutes, which we do already.
I was just like, that doesn't make me have to put those meeting
No,
agendas
no.
together, right?
So it's just making sure, that how we operate the meetings is clearly spelled out in the bylaws. So that was the inclusion of that section. In what was section 5, from the last time we updated the bylaws, which was 2020, was to allow for virtual meetings if we have a state of emergency. We are striking that from the bylaws because the ordinances now cover allowing to do virtual meetings if there's a state of emergency. So we no longer need it in our bylaws. But a significant update would be to allow virtual participation for 2 commissioners for any reason. And that is aligning with how city council and planning board operates their meetings. So we have added that to our bylaws. Really, this is a discussion for y'all to have if you're comfortable with allowing virtual participation. It essentially states that the request must be submitted no later than 2 hours before the meeting, and it again is first come, first served basis. So whoever gets to us first gets that kind of situation. If we receive a request less than 2 hours before the meeting, the chair does have the discretion to allow virtual participation for extraordinary circumstances. So that language is again aligning exactly with what city council and planning board does. I do want to note that Board of Adjustment, they always have 2 members who attend virtually and they rotate out. That's not what we're proposing here. We're just proposing to align that language with planning board and the commission. So this was essentially why we started editing the bylaws, is to allow for that virtual participation
So-
component.
Brittany, I mean, previously we had talked about, we could have, like, somebody could join virtually, yeah, but we still needed to have a quorum in person. Is that no longer required, or is
You
that
would-
part of that chapter 30, section 46?
So it does say in here that it has
Ordinance.
to be in-person quorum still has to be present.
Okay.
Is it possible, just as a query, and this will end up being city attorneys getting involved, I'm sure. Is it possible that the virtual attendance could count for the quorum for the supermajorities, could count for the supermajorities? Just because I know that's a harder piece for you guys to wrangle.
You'd still have to have the appropriate number of commission members present in order to vote on those matters.
In person or?
I think what Fred is saying is, like, if we had, like, today, we had the one item that was a super majority needed 6. So if we had 5 people in person to be our quorum and our 6th person had the flu and was joining virtually and was still a voting person for the super majority item, could that or do we have to have, when it's a super majority, do we have to have 6 people here in person?
I think it'd be fine if that 6th person was virtual. And I say that because council would do the same thing, right? If they received a protest petition for a rezoning where they need 10 affirmative votes to approve that rezoning, some of those council members could be virtual. So I think that'd be all right.
Yeah, that'll just, I think, help staff out in terms of scheduling. And then we can
Especially
strong
for
arm members who
agencies.
can't make it, but who could at least maybe zoom in for those items.
Well, I mean, as the chair, I have, I can deny that, so.
She has power.
So let me.
I'm on vacation, might go a little different that I have the flu and I have to come in and accept
Yeah.
everybody.
And we did initially just propose if only commissioners were ill, but Nate pointed out to us that it should be for any reason. So I think that will be good flexibility. So another big change for LDDRC would be introducing public comment at the beginning of the meeting. So currently, the LPC has public comment for general preservation matters at the beginning of the meeting. but LDDRC does not. But in addition to adding this public comment at the beginning of the meeting, this would also be where we encourage those who have come to speak on design review items to share their public comment. So we would no longer have public comment following each individual design review item. And I'm gonna let Amy explain this section to you a little bit more.
Yeah, so I'll try to be brief. The next part of this bylaw document is public hearings. Public hearings have notice posted with a sign on the property and a mailer to neighbors, and everyone has kind of an equal opportunity to know to come and talk if they'd like to. That is different than your design review items where there has been no public notice. And when people come to comment to you, they're sort of self-selected. They are, you know, friends and advocates for the applicant or people who just follow your agendas closely or something like that. And so this has come up as a concern that when you hear a comment on those non-noticed items, you may be taking something into evidence that the ordinance doesn't require you to. And again, you're not necessarily hearing a broad representation of opinion about these projects. So we have suggested to try to make that distinction. We're not suggesting people should be told they can't come and say whatever it is they want to say to you, but we suggest it's isolated at the beginning of the agenda and that you keep in the back of your mind that that is a sliver of opinion about the project you're going to hear. This is a much bigger issue, I think, at LPC. If this isn't something you're comfortable with, if you feel like this sends a message that you're not open to hearing comment, another way to deal with it is simply on the slides that Heather reads before each agenda section. There's a reminder to everyone. Take this with a grain of salt because it is, you know, it is not a noticed public hearing and you're not necessarily hearing broad public comment.
Do we hear public hearings?
On demolitions and designations, I think would be the primary reason you have a noticed public hearing.
It would be demolition mostly. You don't have the same number of public hearings that come before. There could also potentially be, I think, economic hardships. I don't think they would go to the commission because you would be the denying body, so those would come to you for demolition.
I have to run, but my comment would be that I think separating it out to the beginning is a little problematic. I think particularly because we are concerned with such a small geographic area. And I think most of our comments do come from folks who are very active within that community and often from quasi-official organizations, you know, R&O type of thing. Feels to me like leaving it alone is smarter. I don't feel like it has been terribly problematic, but especially because LPC is a bit of a different beast. We are so tight geographically that I honestly feel like leaving it alone would be better.
Fun, and hopefully, I think, you know, between myself and Andy speaks up, we police ourselves a bit and remind ourselves of what our purview is and what we can take into consideration and what we can't. We're generally pretty good at that, so.
Would you like to introduce just general public comment at the beginning of the meeting or?
Almost never hear that at planning board. You know,
Yeah,
twice a year, somebody comes with general public comment and I
Okay.
just, it feels like a rote thing that we do. We almost
doesn't
never
feel
hear it,
necessary here.
especially here. That's just my opinion.
I mean, I don't know that it hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When
I-
we were on
I-
LPC, we'd occasionally, thanks Fred, we'd occasionally get somebody who was like coming in to talk about a program or something that they
or
were
a heads up
passionate
on
about.
something, or, yeah.
But it felt relatively few and far between, and most people that would come for public comment were speaking about a specific project, so.
Yeah, I think that's generally what we see.
It does send a message of being open to hearing
Yeah.
input from people. So having it as an agenda item is no big deal.
Yeah, it's 30 seconds to ask if there's anybody wishing to speak on any general preservation related matters.
And devil's advocate, I'm assuming it's time limited, like.
It would
minutes.
be two minutes.
So someone starts waxing philosophically about something, 2 minutes on your coffee trip, you know, that's okay, we're good.
So the next section is about public hearings, which again are very limited before this commission. However, we're just aligning that language with how the LPC operates their public hearings. So they afford 10 minutes to all per persons who have submitted the proposal. A second opportunity for 10 minutes to those who are affected economically by the public hearing. All public hearings, you get 3 minutes to speak before the commission. So this is generally just what this language is. It's in alignment with what LPC is. We did have some language for public hearings, but it was very limited. So we're just trying to, again, provide that clarity on how public hearings operate. And then I think that's it for the updates. Sounds like we still need to do some work before we bring this back to you, but we would bring it back in December. So that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of timelines and things of that nature.
I did catch one other little typo
Okay.
in the filing deadline, section 1. It just says that they're due non-later
Yeah.
than noon. I think it should be no later, but minor.
I have an open-ended question about the bylaws and just specifically with today, given that we're down in our roster. Is there, let's say we only wound up with 5. I mean, is there a mechanism to a supermajority of the body that exists?
You mean,
It's like how-
you're
like what-
saying we only get down to 5 active
Or
commissioners?
somebody else moves to New Zealand and then all of a sudden, like, there becomes like an impossible situation for an applicant to get approval. And I don't think we can have that.
So the ordinance very specifically calls out quorum, so it would be opening up the ordinances for that purposes. I will say I just need to get on the recruiting for LDDRC. We do have some people interested, so yeah, I think, you know, it's hard for LDDRC because unlike the commission, LDDRC very specifically says someone serving
role.
this role, someone serving this role. Luckily, right now, our 2 vacant positions are at large, so they're easier to recruit for. But we have a really hard time recruiting for business owners within the districts and residents within the districts. Because
Know anybody?
it's just, many of those people have other concerns than
Yeah.
attending this commission.
It is a good point, though, and maybe we need to talk with the attorney's office, whether there's already language in place that requires the city to be able to conduct its business in any circumstance. I think we cannot suddenly not be able to hold meetings because we have an open seat.
Right, or if there's liability to an applicant saying, I did everything, I brought an application that was recommended for approval and it couldn't
not
be
my fault,
approved
there's
for a
nothing
month and a half, like.
Yeah.
I'd be real mad if I were an applicant in that situation.
Also, the super majority was really intended to approve the new infill, but it applies for any project, like the patio that came today. It was really intended, because you can get additional height in those special review districts. And I think it was intended to assure when you're getting that additional height, that overwhelmingly the commission is approving that, not for little things like a patio necessarily.
Right. There's
That's
maybe
always, and those
one
sites have
component
increasingly become infilled, and I'm very concerned about that language still.
Yeah,
I mean,
What's-
there's not very many of them left, right?
There's not.
There's the half block at Eastern Market,
And
the bell tower site.
the bell tower site. Yep. As long as the one beside the Barth goes forward, which I believe it is.
who sort of gatekeeps those sorts of changes? Is that a staff recommendation that goes to council? Is it us?
Ordinance updates do have to go to council currently.
Yes, that's right.
We are always very leery to open up our ordinance because it can result in losing.
Go up first, you don't want to.
Yeah,
Right.
so, we've not done it, it's just we're more leery on it than say like the bylaws, which you make the rules and we can have conversations with you on.
But it wouldn't be a bylaw issue to say, in the event a super majority can't be reached because of inadequate attendance. It's not a bylaw to say, well, then in that case, you only need a simple majority.
That's right. You can't override the order.
I don't know, I'm just, I was nervous today, for example, just like, come on, Andy. Like, we gotta
Sorry.
get- That's all good. Not, like, it could happen to anybody, right, on a snowy day.
I was actually hoping
So-
that 2 other people were gonna be late because of snow.
I mean, I barely did it.
Same, Andy, you weren't.
It turned it like, my big issue is York, they restriped it. I was like, oh, okay, it was 10 minutes about what I expected. And then I turned on the 13th. I'm like, are you kidding me?
No, I was in the car and I'm like, kept checking. I had to email Brittany, tell her I'm late, like,
Yeah, I think we were all ready.
yeah.
But yeah, I think for us, like, this is a hard commission to staff because the very specific roles that come with serving
Yeah.
on the commission. But
Makes
in
it
other ways,
also-
you're very much easier than the LPC. So,
We're at large members. See what I can do.
yeah,
I'll
I have
make
some
the
interested
calls, too.
people, but we're supposed to have, I only really have 2 candidates and we're supposed to send 2 for each vacant position to the mayor's office. So that's always a struggle.
Does this get circulated to us, or do we just revisit at the next meeting?
I emailed it to you yesterday with the red line version. I can recirculate an updated draft.
I was just thinking the new
yeah.
notes that we talked about.
Yeah, no, I could recirculate that. So we have that in front of us to discuss as well and for y'all to think on.
We have any further discussion this morning? Okay. I will close the meeting at 10:05.